It's 8 o'clock. I'll call the meeting of the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee to order. Chair Fiedler is joining us via Zoom, so I'm chairing the meeting in the boardroom. Roll call, please.
Bob Fiedler,
Here.
Paul Adams,
Present.
Mark Carlson, Kathy Leaf,
Present.
Tim Ramberg,
Present.
Okay, next on the agenda item, we have two sets of minutes to approve because we had our regular meeting and then we had a special meeting. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to either of those minutes? Seeing none, they'll be approved as printed. Public comment? Anyone here from the public to comment? Anyone here from the public for public comment? Last time, public comment. Okay, we'll move on to our business items. Financial report, please.
Yeah, and I was just going to check with Supervisor Fiedler to see if he needed the agenda items rearranged at all. I know he had maybe a time limitation this morning.
No, I do not. Thank you for asking, but I'm also, Ken, I'm pending on Zoom. I did figure out how to get into it, so if you'll let me in, I can see everybody, but otherwise I'll be happy to stay on audio.
Okay. Yep, we can see you on the, it must be the phone device, but I will switch you to the other account.
Thanks. I'm on just fine, Ken.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Supervisor Fiedler. All right, so the financial report. It's in your packet. We're getting close to the end of the year. What I can tell you is the department heads are doing an excellent job of staying within budget. Revenues are right where we'd expect them to be at this time of year. We tend to collect those a little bit after the year. A lot of times revenues are collected post. But what I would say is that we are on target for where we should be right now. Are there any questions of anything that appeared in the budget or financial report?
Okay, seeing no questions, we'll move on to the circuit court update. Judge Needham.
Not a lot to report. I think I mentioned last month that Christie's office was finally fully staffed. Well, as of Monday, she's down one. We had a staff member who decided to take a job with Joint Finance in Madison with the legislature. And so her last day was Monday. And so Christie will be recruiting and hopefully finding someone to take that position. Our Child Protection Juvenile Justice Subcommittee of CJCC is up and running. We welcomed Supervisor Leaf to that group. We've had one meeting, we have another meeting coming up, and we're looking at some areas that hopefully will improve not only the delivery of services, but also how we can coordinate, one of those being in the area of testing for parents who have substance abuse issues. And so we've been working with Dr. Ghali and the Justice Support Center to come up with some protocols as well as policies as confidentiality, surrounds child protection cases. So we're working on that. I did have a chance to listen to Judge Waterman's comments at the county board meeting the other night, and I apologize. I wasn't there, but I was running up and down a basketball court with a black and white striped shirt, roughing a basketball game, so I appreciate he stepped in. But just put a little meat to the bone, so to speak, in terms of the mental health and substance abuse challenges that we're facing as a court. By way of example, I had a family in on a child protection case the other day whose 12-year-old son is suffering and struggling with mental health. His parents reported that even through a private vendor, the soonest they were able to get an evaluation was April of next year. And then the other thing I'd like to reference, I know Judge Waterman talked about that population in the jail who have competency issues, who we determine to be incompetent, and then we send them to Mendota for a restoration of competency. I have a young man who's been in jail now for over 2 years, who cycles in, cycles out, cycles in, cycles out. And the last finding was incompetency, so I ordered that he be restored to competence. And I just got a communication from the sheriff saying it'll be 8 weeks before we can get him into Mendota. So for 8 weeks, he's going to continue to be in the jail awaiting to get to Mendota to hopefully be restored to competence, and then he'll come back. And hopefully we can get a trial scheduled and get that case moving. Supervisor Adams was in my courtroom yesterday, so I always welcome supervisors who come to observe and watch. I should have invited him up on the bench, but he was in the gallery. And then finally, last thing I'll comment on is just the cooperation that we're experiencing with the contractors. Noise is a significant issue in our courtrooms. And if we get to that point where it's not manageable, we send a communication through one of our staff, and within minutes, they've stopped working. And I understand that probably presents challenges and delays on their ends, but it's just been, so far, knock on wood, a wonderful experience in terms of that level of cooperation that we've experienced with our contractors. But other than that, that's really what we have going on.
Any questions for Judge Needham?
Chairwoman?
Okay.
If I may, I just want to follow up on one thing that the judge had mentioned, Judge Needham had mentioned. He talks about that long wait to get people in. And we have seen now a couple, most recently this last week, where those that are deemed incompetent, even when we hold them in jail, or as we wait for them to open up a bed in Mendota, just this week we had one that was not medically fit for the jail because of all the medical issues, and Mendota is not a medical hospital. It is a mental health hospital. So Mendota was resistive of taking them. So through Corp Counsel, did we end up in a nursing home?
I don't know where he ended up, but they were able to pick him up yesterday, which his wait would have been probably 8 weeks also, and there was no way the jail could manage him. He was in there for probably a week and a half, and during that time had to go to the hospital several times. So I was able to reach out to the forensic unit and ask them, please, you have to find him a placement sooner. So I think they did take him to like a secure nursing home facility because he had very high medical needs.
Our staff and even our medical were doing things that were really outside the norm and time-consuming, taxing. So that's not the first. And I think there's another one in the wings. So as we talk about some of those challenges, that is another one.
So it is a significant problem, but I at one point there was talk of the whole, oh, sorry, can I just say one thing? Having a facility in Eau Claire, but we've seen no evidence that that's moving forward. So at the legislative level and the Wisconsin counties level, I know everybody's trying to move the needle, but it doesn't seem to be moving.
And that's a completely separate issue. So these are individuals that are charged with crimes and they've raised competency. So they don't go to the same facilities as individuals that are subject to involuntary commitments, which the facilities in Eau Claire were the ones that they were looking at, hopefully increasing beds. Most recently, our Chapter 51s, I think the last at least 3 did go to Mayo in Eau Claire. So that's good. They, 3 less transports all the way over to Winnebago. But we are still waiting for additional movement on beds closer to St. Croix County.
You're not a hospital. Supervisor Adams.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. So you partially answered my question. Are we bound to just in the state of Wisconsin only? Are we able to go out of state and get any assistance at all?
Not that I'm aware of. I think they have to stay in state, and the reason being is they're technically still in the jail. They've, allegedly committed a crime, they're pending trial, and so there would be some issues jurisdictionally if they're transported across state lines. So that's why we try to keep them, I think we have to keep them in Wisconsin.
I wish I had a fix for that. Any other questions before we move on? The next item is medical legalization of marijuana impact on law enforcement in St. Croix County. And this was an item that Supervisor Adams wanted on the agenda. I'm not sure who wants to take it.
I can start and Sheriff Knudsen can chime in. So the short answer is the legalization of marijuana in Minnesota doesn't affect us. The marijuana is still illegal in Wisconsin. It's still enforced. The only nuance is the river. So on the river, if something's illegal in both Wisconsin and Minnesota, so say boating while intoxicated, our sheriff deputies can enforce that along anywhere in the river. But if something's illegal in one state and not the other, so now marijuana, the middle of the channel is the divider. So our sheriff's deputies can enforce marijuana laws on our side of the middle of the channel, but not the Minnesota side. So that makes some, practically how easy is that to enforce? Not very easy. How are you gonna know for sure unless you're out there with like a calibrated laser rangefinder? But other than that, it doesn't affect enforcement. People can't possess marijuana that they bought legally in Minnesota in Wisconsin. Medical marijuana is still illegal in Wisconsin. There's no, if you have a prescription out of Minnesota or Illinois, it doesn't mean you can possess it in Wisconsin. So the river is really the only nuance for that.
Yeah, and we have not given any directives to staff to change the way we've done things from years past. Our statutes and ordinances are still in effect, and we are enforcing them when appropriate. And yeah, nothing's changed on our, though it will be more challenging. There are some nuances, and we just had one recently where you attempt to stop a vehicle in Wisconsin and it goes into Minnesota. and then they have dope in the car. So those are some training, retraining, things that we're working on, but a few things like that. But it's still business as usual as far as we are.
Did you have any questions?
Can I, if I
Oh,
could
go
just add in, where we're seeing it is in testing. If we have people from Minnesota who are testing, or parents who are testing, who we have an absolute sobriety condition, it's legal in Minnesota, but they're testing positive for purposes of enforcement in Wisconsin. And we try to make it very clear that you're on a Wisconsin bond, you're going to have to maintain your sobriety, but I know it's become a challenge for child protection because parents, do what they do in Minnesota where it's legal, and then we require that they test over here for purposes of their monitoring. And as the sheriff said, very seldom do we see a possession of meth, a possession of cocaine, where they also don't find marijuana in the car. And, the looks on some of these folks from Minnesota, well, it's legal, and we explain, not when you cross Midway over the bridge, it's not legal in Wisconsin. We've had a challenge to the medical side of it, and it's not prescribed in Wisconsin, and so there is no exception for driving under the influence with marijuana in your system. But we've had some defense attorneys from Minnesota try to raise that as a defense, that, well, they have a valid prescription. Well, show me a valid prescription from Wisconsin, and then we'll entertain that defense, which they can't. So it's, it's the reality of being a border state where there are different laws for different circumstances.
Thank you. Dr. Galley.
Yes, thank you. I think if I could just add, and I would echo what Judge Needham said, this comes up from time to time with our pretrial cases and certainly with CPS cases. I actually reached out to Bob Rarrett, Health and Human Services Director, for a contact, somebody that may be able to come to CJCC and speak to this point for us. So if that would be of interest to this body and others, I think maybe early 2024, we could have somebody come in and just speak to what they see from a legal standpoint and otherwise. So I can look into that.
Mm-hmm. I think that'd be great. Any other questions? Chair Fiedler, do you have anything from the Zoom land?
No, thank you, Chair. I'm all set.
Okay, we'll move on then to the resolution authorizing referendum to increase tax levy for public safety positions. Administrator Witt. Who has to get past the statutes?
Okay, we all have to get past those statutes. So we discussed this last month briefly, and there was some general consensus that you would entertain going back in 2024 for a reduced scope public safety referendum. So this resolution is that first step. In order to be on the April 2024 ballot, it's either April or November ballots in 2024 for us, you'd have to have something approved by about the middle of January. So timing-wise, this is where we're at. I will tell you that when we discussed it last month, we sort of came to a consensus of what those positions would look like. If I can get this to scroll down. I think Janet was messing with the mouse or something. It's really sensitive. Yeah. So this is the way the question would look on the ballot based upon the discussion. So one of the things, though, that I did from our discussion last time, from all the positions that we talked about, I eliminated one additional position off of that list that you guys had talked about, because one of the other things we had mentioned was we wanted to keep it under $1 million. So I had to eliminate one additional position to get it under $1 million. We had 3 correctional deputies. I reduced that down to 2 correctional deputies in order to get that. You can change that to a different position if you wanted to, but I think this is the maximum number of positions if we want to stay under the $1 million which I think has, a psychological effect for the voters when they're looking at the question and reading it. The other nuance, I guess, to it is I didn't explain that the district attorney investigator, I say one district attorney investigator, it is a part-time investigator. It's probably not worth it within the body of the question to elaborate on that. So it just says one, but know that it's budgeted for at a half. At the end of the day, what the voters are really approving is the change in the dollar amount. And we're telling them this is what we're going to do with it. But it's not 100% direct tie. I think as long as we stay within the framework of what we've promised to do, it'll be fine. But ultimately, what they're approving is the dollar amount change. That's what the Department of Revenue looks at, is the dollar amount, really, at the end of the day. So I did bold then in the question, and I think we'll submit it that way too. Really what the purpose is. So for the purpose of hiring 2 sheriff's correction deputies, 1 sheriff investigator, 2 mental health co-responders, 1 district attorney investigator, 1 deputy clerk of court, 1 youth justice early intervention specialist to address the county's most pressing public safety needs. So.
And that's really, and just to reiterate, I know we've talked about this before, but for anybody that's watching, the middle where you've bolded is really the Mad Libs part of this resolution that we can fill in. The rest is required language, correct?
Correct, yep. Yeah. And then the math part of it, my favorite part, so it's a 1.9% increase in the levy and $896,000 increase in the total levy. So it goes from 46,002,000 to 46,898,000 is the difference if the voters approve this.
Okay. We should have this on the floor before we
Nope,
discuss.
you don't have to.
Okay.
Not at committee level.
So any questions about this or comments?
I've got a comment.
Okay. Supervisor Adams?
I'd like to propose that we put the 2 mental health co-responders and the youth early intervention in the lead. I think just psychologically, when people see those kind of things up front, it kind of hits them hard that we need that now in our society. So I just recommend that we just reorder and put those 2 up front. Thank you.
Supervisor Ramberg?
And also I would maybe recommend, which results in a levy of 46 million, a total levy. I think at first glance, maybe somebody would misinterpret that as an increase, but
I don't know that we can change
No.
that.
you can't change that.
No, I can plug in the dollar amounts and I can change the words between the 2 commas that are bolded.
Okay.
The rest of the language is defined by state statute.
Any other?
Oh,
Oh,
microphone.
microphone, Jashina.
And so, to address the county's most pressing public safety needs, is that a qualifier only for the youth justice position? I know it's not, but I would suggest maybe putting a semicolon and then said positions to address, so, because they're all addressing public safety. The way it's written stylistically, it appears that it's only the use
Oh, I got it.
that,
And I think we can change that part. We can add, that's good catch.
I was an accounting major, not an English major.
Well, that's why you need all of us, right?
Yes.
Any other comments from anyone? So you want a motion to approve to move to the county board, or how do you want to handle?
Well, it's up to you, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the goal, but I didn't know how you wanted me to handle it. All right. So do you need a formal amendment to this language, or are you going to?
I don't. I mean, as long as we're in agreement, I will
Okay.
make those changes to it, and you guys can approve it as amended.
Okay.
So I have a
Is there-
semicolon and a reordering of the positions.
Is there a motion to approve a motion for the resolution so we can bring it to the county board?
Yeah, so move.
Okay, is there a second?
So move.
Or you're seconding? Okay, good. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. Motion passes. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank you. I know the department heads, this means a lot to them, that you recognize the needs that they have in order for them to successfully do the job that you've charged them with. You have to be able to provide them the resources, and they really appreciate your support, so thank you.
I had one question after, now that we've moved this on, and if it passes the board, I'm assuming there'll be similar outreach from from Adam and, you know, others, like similar to last time.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot last time. I think we'll probably drop the roadshow portion of it. I think the number of people we reached probably didn't justify the amount of effort that went into that part. The website absolutely will keep the digital presence the same as we had last time. And then really we're in discussion about whether we should do a mailer on it or not. That's kind of the variable piece maybe.
Okay, thanks. Next item is justice support updates.
Sure, thank you. I have 3 quick items that I want to speak on. The first is just kind of regarding this youth justice early intervention specialist. So on Tuesday, I had an opportunity to go to Madison to listen to a public forum on truancy that the Speaker of the House had assembled a task force. They've been working this fall. And there were 6 speakers. The 2 that I was able to listen to was a researcher who had collected some truancy data from Kenosha County and talking about some of the struggles they had there and identifying busing as a huge issue, what they've seen over probably the last 6 years, why kids aren't able to make it to school. Then the other 2 that I listened to were a school resource officer and superintendent from Kettle Moraine, and again, talking about some of their similar challenges. Again, larger school districts, certainly, but I think one of the big takeaways that I had was the theme of truancy is a challenge across the state. It's maybe being dealt with a little bit differently, and it feels like maybe there's going to be some movement in 24. This is kind of me reading between the lines on some trying to standardize how truancy is addressed in the state of Wisconsin. So it was very eye-opening for me, that legislative process I'd never been a part of here in Wisconsin. So I'm really glad Supervisor Fiedler had sent me that opportunity. So I went and so I think there is a lot of value to this position here in St. Croix. So I'm hopeful that we can, work to. I know the idea is to embed this person who's currently in our department in the municipal courts. Working with Sue Garrity on that a little bit. But I think there are a number of opportunities to address youth justice here in St. Croix. Okay, second item is testing. So construction has begun in New Richmond on our annex testing site. So drug testing will be offered in New Richmond starting sometime in early 24. Probably by January 1, hopefully our site will be ready to be used, and then soon thereafter we'll be testing up there. Another update with testing. So historically, folks that are ordered to test, whether they're diversion, treatment court, pretrial, or CPS cases, every morning starting at 3 a.m., they can call a hotline number, plug in a PIN, and it tells them whether or not they have to test. Well, conveniently, or not so conveniently for everybody, that line broke about 6 weeks ago for us. That line was free. We weren't paying anything for it, so it was kind of out of sight, out of mind for us until it breaks, of course. Well, we went back and forth for probably 3 weeks with the company, and what we were doing is each department was calling their client list each day and letting them know whether or not they had to test. It really wasn't that much more work, but it wasn't ideal. So what they did do is they created an app. So now every morning starting at 3 a.m., the clients can go on and plug that PIN into an app on the internet, phone, tablet, computer. So it's very similar. We do have some concerns about internet accessibility, though. Some of our clients may not have reliable internet. It's a small percentage, but I think long-term we're going to come up with a different solution. We've looked around, Shelby and I and Kate have looked around. States and areas do things differently. They have like a color code system where you're given a color and you call in, and that particular day, if it's color blue or red or whatever, you have to go test. So something like that. It's probably something we'll have to pay for, which I'm looking for sustainability, especially now that we're increasing our testing capacity. We need something that's reliable. So I want to thank all the departments because it was a struggle for a couple weeks, especially as we're bringing on more CPS testing. I know there were some frustrations there, so I appreciate everybody's patience with us. Kind of last thing I'll speak to is staffing. So right now in justice support, we have 2 colleagues that are out on maternity leave through mid-February, early March. One is our treatment court coordinator, and the other is our adult intervention specialist, a government center case manager. So if anyone has questions for treatment court, you can refer those to me, or Kayla Stesniak is our case manager, who will largely be taking over the day-to-day functions until Kate returns. But adult early intervention, so those cases that maybe don't fall neatly into treatment court, diversion, pretrial, those can be referred to me, and then I'll kick them out to our case managers. So we're light on staff right now, but we're filling the gaps.
Great. Any questions for Dr. Gelli? Thank you for all that you're doing. And I know that the truancy issue came up in our subcommittee under CJCC. So it's an important thing that we're, and really, you know, if they're not going to school, where are they? What are they doing?
Yeah. And post-pandemic, truancy has gone through the roof in terms of students re-engaging, and I know there is at least a split of opinion as to whether truancy is a precursor of other issues in the future, whether substance abuse or delinquency or adult criminal behavior. But we are trying to work, again, primarily with our municipal courts, with Phil and his crew, to come up with a meaningful response to truancy. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge. You know, parents are getting up and going to work at 6 a.m. and expecting their kids to get up and get themselves ready and go to school, and it's a challenge.
Thank you. Any requests for future agenda items? Okay. Announcements, correspondence. Janet, nothing. Meeting adjourned, 8:29.